Yo, what's up? It's me, Tim Keys, and I'm back with a follow-up video to talk about Reason 13 and some new features that I think would be beneficial. Now, if you watched or listened to the last video, I apologize for that. Had some monitoring issues I was unaware of. But if you listened to that last video or you've seen any of the other videos from the YouTube influencers, you know that Reason 13 is coming out and it has some interesting features. Of course, we got the updated sequencer, the the new sounds, all of that stuff, the new synthesizer, new effects, all that good jazz. I'm really curious to see how they implement these features, in particular, how they will improve the piano roll in the DAW. I think depending on how they go about utilizing that feature, I think that could have a great impact on Reason more so than any other feature they're advertising at this point. So I hope they do that really well. Right now, in my opinion, the best editor of any DAW is FL Studio's Piano Roll, and I would say Ableton 12 is a close second. That's just my opinion. Played with both of them. I got Ableton 11. I own the new FL Studio, and so I think they have a great piano roll and it does wonders. Now, in terms of some features that I think would be helpful for Reason to implement, that's kind of what I want to talk about in this video. And the first one is, obviously got it up on the screen, that's stem separation. Now, there are quite a few DAWs at this point that do stem separation, and of I know like that's a point of contention in some of the forums because people will say like, hey, we need to add these features, and then you have the pushback from different users who just say, well, we don't need stem separation, we don't need the AI tools, blah blah blah. And I mean, technically you don't, right? You don't need it. You can use lalalalau.ai, which is a free tool for stem separation. I've done some videos on that. You can check that out, or any other video that has that content. It's out there on YouTube. There's some other free tools. Voice AI, it's another one. But at this point too, like if we're talking about, competition and where you spend your money, you got to think MPC has stem separation. They implemented it for $9. You pay the fee. You have it built in not only to the software of the Akai ecosystem, but you could have it, and use it in conjunction with your units, which is pretty cool. So that's good for them. I don't know if they implemented it standalone yet, but it's there. FL Studio has stem separation. Waveform has stem separation. I think Logic has stem separation. Serato Studio has stem separation built in to their DAWs. I know if you get Serato Sample, the VST, that's another workaround. You can have it as a VST, and you can take that and use it in any DAW. So, there is that option. But I also think just having that option available in your DAW as a standard resource that's available to you would be great, just because like again, all of these other companies are looking at where technology is headed, and they're figuring out different ways to implement that technology and be innovative. And so I think in order for Reason to stay current with the technology and where technology is heading, this would be a feature that would go a long way in, helping out that aspect of their DAW. That's just my opinion. I know some people feel otherwise, but that would be a huge one. Number two, taking audio that's polyphonic and converting it to MIDI would be a huge deal in my opinion. Now there are some tools that do that as well, like RipX does it. RipX, you can do stem separation and take polyphonic audio and convert it to MIDI. And you know, you can do that with no problem, but you got to pay an extra fee. Ableton is, I think it's the only DAW that allows you to take MIDI, I mean, not MIDI, take audio that's polyphonic. So, you know, you got your chords, you got your melodies, you got your harmonies, and you can take all of those things and to, you know, whatever extent or another, that can all be converted to MIDI, and you can rework that in your, you know, in your DAW, and work that in your production, pardon me. And again, I think that's a standout feature for Ableton. A lot of people don't use it, or you don't hear it discussed as much, but you know, it is a feature in like a Melodyne, so that's a workaround. Again, I have some videos that do polyphonic audio to MIDI conversion, and it's free. But again, you got to download it. It has its limitations. It would be good to have something in Reason that does that. Yes, Reason does monophonic audio. So bass lines, leads, voices and vocals and all of that good jazz. You know, anything that's monophonic, it will take and convert it to MIDI, and you get it with some success around it. But, you know, anything that's polyphonic in terms of audio, Reason can't do that, at least not right now. It is what it is. I think if Reason implemented that feature at some point, that would be a big deal. Another one that would be huge for Reason is matching the tempo of your audio to that of the sequencer and vice versa. So taking, you know, the tempo of your audio and matching it to the tempo of your sequencer and vice versa, I think would be a huge bonus for Reason, and it would just help with workflow. Again, you have other DAWs like Ableton that does it. Serato Studio, I would assume, does it, because I know Serato Sample, the VST, does it, and Bitwig does it. Like, so you can have audio that's playing at, you know, you have an audio file that's 150 BPM, you put it in your sequencer, it's going to line everything and match it up for you. And I think for, again, Reason users, that would be huge. Now, to be fair, you can do that with Rex files. So I'll give you the example, because somebody will argue and say, well, you can do this with Rex files. And that's true. Notice how everything, I'm in the Rex file folder right now. You see the little icons. And if you notice, everything is labeled for you. 100 stands for 100 BPM, 90 BPM, etc., etc. Now I can take that, I can throw it in, I can play it back. That definitely sounds like hip hop to me. Not really. So, you know, I can match that up, and it will play it without any issues. So it does this without any problem if I'm using a Rex file. Take my tempo, bring it up to 158, and again, you're hearing it, no problem. Drop it all the way down to 80, 70, do 70. And yeah, it did that with no problem. So that's cool. And it matched up everything for me, so I didn't have to do anything. However, that's only if I'm using a Rex file. If I'm using a standard WAV file, if that stuff is not labeled, like it's just got the loop. Now, most loop packs you buy, they'll have the BPM labeled for you. So you'll know that when you throw that into your into the sequencer, you need to line everything up accordingly, because it won't automatically do it. So yeah, if you have a sample pack that you know has everything labeled, 125, 130 BPM, it's done, then hopefully then all you have to do is just make sure that when you dump it to the sequencer, it's at 130 BPM, and then you can go and make adjustments with the wave file. It'll match everything up once it's already in there, but no problem. However, if you get a loop pack from like your buddy or something, and or you're already working, and you're working at a 150 BPM, and you just throw that waveform in there, and your waveform is at 120 BPM, you got to do more to match that and line that up, or readjust the tempo of your sequencer and bring everything back up. Again, these are not big deals, but again, it takes away from the speed of the workflow. It adds more time to it, unnecessary time. So if Reason is talking about implementing a faster workflow, then I think they should, do more to match up the timing and the tempo of audio files when you bring them into the sequencer. Again, my opinion, not a big deal to some, but I think if you're a sample-based producer, that would be a great help for you if you are a Reason user. Now, again, they kind of missed the mark with Mimic. Like Mimic had a lot of features that, was kind of in demand. It was very well, versatile sampler. I can't even find my Mimic right now, which is terrible. Here we go. And so like Mimic addresses a lot of different issues because there's a lot you can do with Mimic. You can do the pitch and the find the transients and move stuff around, etc., very much like you can in the Octorex player, and like you can in something like Ableton's Simpler. However, Reason's Mimic will not match the tempo of your audio to the tempo of the sequencer like you can, or like it does in Ableton. Ableton, you put audio in the sequencer and it matches everything up, or vice versa. If you put the audio in the Simpler instrument, it'll line everything up so you can get to work. And that feature has been greatly improved with, I think it was Ableton 11, like version 11.3. They added that when they added the new drift, because they were putting out the new push 3, and so they had to add that feature. In my opinion, one of the best time stretches in the game. If Reason implemented some of that, again, I think that would be huge. And if they're talking about speeding up your workflow, I think that's great. Again, just my opinion, but they should do it. Plus, not to be disrespectful to the format and the developers who've done it, or the people who use it, but I don't hear too much about people using Rex files. And most third-party libraries that I see being sold, the majority of them don't sell Rex files. So, and I'm pausing. If you could see my face, there's a lot of angst, because again, I don't see anybody using Rex files in 2024. I don't even see them being sold in the US like that. Definitely not among third-party developers. You see waveforms being sold in loop packs. And so if we're talking about the matching thing and doing that, yeah, it works with Rex files, but most people aren't using Rex files anymore. And they're not being sold in the same way, at least not here in the States. Moving forward. All right, the last big feature, not big, but kind of big, that I think would help Reason, is the use of like your MIDI generating plugins. Now, again, Reason meets this need very well, in my opinion, with tools like Beatmap, the drum sequencer, the arpeggiator, the pattern mutator, No Echo, the dual arpeggio. All of these things are great. Scales and chords, they are great and they are wonderful. But when I compare them to something like InstaScale. I can't type today. Instachord, InstaScales, InstaComposer, Scalar. Keep rambling. And then what's the other one? I think it's like Orb. Orb Arpeggios. Yeah, here we go. So Orb based hexachords. These products, hex chords, orb chords, all of those good jabs, melody, and so forth. And again, you don't need these plugins to get busy. Like, that's not what we're saying. So again, don't get angry if you're a diehard Reason user. I'm gonna get back to you in a little bit. That's not what I'm saying. You don't need those things to create. The players will kind of like meet that need for you. However, I'm going to reference Ableton because Ableton has the ability to do both. They have their own, MIDI generating tools and have had them for quite some time. Like, in the same fashion, if you use Ableton and you want to use their MIDI generating tools, you pull up your instrument, you make sure you pull up the MIDI tool, if you will, you'll pull it in front of the instrument instead of on top like you do in Reason. But same idea, it goes before the instrument and then you put the effects after. Ableton has that stock. Like, so they have that feature as well. But then they also have the ability and have given users the ability to use the MIDI plugins. So they got the best of both worlds. And yes, they've done that, as they have also decided to add more MIDI generating tools to their DAW with this last update of version 12. And I think for Reason, do they need to do it? No. Are there workarounds to get these going in Reason? Yes, I've used them. However, why should we have to do workarounds? And I feel like that's one of the bigger issues with Reason, like the user base. I think a lot of users are content with the workarounds. Like, you can use Scalar in Reason, but there's a workaround you have to do. You can't use it the same way you would use it in Ableton or FL Studio or even a free software like BandLab. And that's kind of a bummer, right? Like, as powerful as Reason is with all of its features, you still can't use MIDI generating plugins that are third party. You can only use the players. If you're using those MIDI generating plugins, you have to do the workaround, which again kind of kills the experience. You can use it, like I can program some MIDI progression in Scalar, and it will drop it out for me. I can use hexachords, and it will pump out some stuff, and then I can just kind of drop it in. But it's so much of an easier transition and a smoother experience in an Ableton or an FL Studio or a Logic or even what's the Cakewalk. I think I had it right there, Cakewalk, and that's free. And when you say this in forums, like, people get offended, and the immediate response becomes, well, I can make great music in Reason. You don't need all of that stuff to make great music. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we've been making great music with pianos and violins and trained professional musicians and orchestras. Like, you don't need any of this stuff to make good music. We've been making good music in the 90s with hip hop, rock, metal, pop, and how things sounded at that time. However, that was at that time. We are now in 2024. And as the technology has increased and changed, other companies are taking note and trying to keep up with that. Reason should do the same. Am I saying we should get to the point where we have something that makes the music for us? Absolutely not, because that has its own can of worms. But what I am saying is we should have Like if the other DAWs are paying attention to where things are going and being innovative, perhaps Reason Studio should also be looking at things in that manner too. And yeah, they got the selling point where you can take Reason and use it in your favorite DAW, like at Ableton and like FL Studio and all, and that's cool, right? MPC can do the same thing. FL Studio, you can do the same thing. But those DAWs never advertise their products as um, like that's not the main thing about Ableton. Not Ableton. That's not the main thing about MPC software that makes it what it is. Like what makes MPC great is that it's a great standalone unit. Yes, you can link it up and have both the software experience and the standalone, and it can do both. And yes, you can use it in your other DAW if you need to, but that's not the main selling point with the MPC. Likewise, FL Studio you can use as a VST. I mean, we'll just type in FL Studio and you see it, FL Studio, image line. You just throw it in, watch it load. It's gonna take its time and I'm gonna ramble. And yeah, I can have FL Studio running simultaneously in Reason, or I can have FL Studio running in MPC or in Ableton, and it'll do wonders. But they never advertise their stuff like that's the main dish. And so I hope with Reason, like they can really focus on developing the DAW as a DAW and getting it caught up. Because it seems like, I won't even say it seems like, Reason is playing catch up in the aspect of features. And unfortunately, when you bring these dynamics up amongst like the Reason community at large, people get upset. And that is probably part of the reason, no pun intended, that it continues to be behind in its feature set compared to a Logic, a Waveform at this point, even a Cubase, what's the other one? I can't even think of it. Cakewalk, an FL Studio, or Ableton, or a Bitwig for that matter. Because yes, there are some things that Reason does very well, and then there are a lot of these small features or small aspects that they still haven't implemented after 10 years or 15 years after everybody else has done it. The last request, the MIDI plugin usage being an example, and the user base seems content with that. Like your primary user base seems content with that, and when you say something, you get the pushback from your older users or just that certain type of user base or whatever, where they say like, well, hey, we don't need that, and you should shut up complaining about it. And that's unfortunate because in a lot of ways that really keeps the DAW being held back because the users aren't demanding much. So the developers don't have to do much to, make it what it is. Like they don't have to make any improvements. Anyhow, that's all I got. Stem separation, polyphonic conversion of audio to MIDI, improved tempo matching of audio using MIDI plugins, implementing that in a smooth manner so that it creates a good user experience and you don't have to do the workarounds. Look, I remember back in I think it was 2013, 2011, 2013, you had the weird workarounds. If you wanted to get VSTs in the Reason, you had to do all this weird stuff. Look, it's 2024 and nobody has time for that. Give us the goods, Reason Studios. Please and thank you. I'm Tim Keys. I'm out. Leave your opinions in the comment section. And if you say something crazy, that's cool, but I might block you. Peace.